Good morning, guys. CriticasterQ here. For today, I was actually waiting to watch the NGS headline in about an hour or so, but while waiting, I noticed on the NGS website that SEGA put out a couple of articles detailing out some balance adjustments coming for the game on April 10th. There's various buffs for photon arts, techniques, and tech customizations with those as well. There's also a couple of nerfs for the spiral edge tech customization, as well as Encore jump, that add-on skill from Bouncer. So I actually want to take a look at how all this may affect the game on that date. To start, let's take a look at the article with the nerfs on it. The first one being the Sword Tech Arts Customization Spiral Edge Type 2. So this one, how it originally worked is it gives charged potency up to 35% on level 10, but then it increased the charge time to get to that charge potency as a drawback by 100%, or basically doubling the charge time. But this worked too well with a hunter class skill called Sword Arts Overcharge. This gives a second charge state, basically, to any sword PAs that are chargeable. So after 3 seconds, you get 200% potency with that ability. Originally, people would think that this is 3 seconds on top of the original charge state's time. So if it was like 1.5 seconds to get to the first stage, then it'll be an additional 3 seconds on that, so 4.5 seconds to get to this overcharge. That's not how it actually works. This is just 3 seconds at the activation of a PA from the sword that is chargeable. And that is very important in this case because the charge time increase that's coming from this Tech Arts customization for Spiral Edge only applies to the original charge that can be done with Spiral Edge and does not apply to this overcharge class ability. That's why it was super broken. Because if we take a look at this here, like I said, at level 10, it gets to 35% potency. So, like I said, maybe it was like the 1.5 seconds it takes to get the Spiral Edge original charge state. So if you get that plus 100%, that would double it to 3 seconds. That basically eliminates the original charge state, but overcharge stays the same. It just takes 3 seconds no matter what. So you're just getting an extra 35% potency with no drawback with this tech arts customization as it currently stands. So because of that massive increase to the overcharge state of Spiral Edge, it basically made it the most damaging ability within the game and made Hunter super busted and is currently the top for DPS just because of this single ability. You basically just spam this trying to get Hunter Avenger arts to proc on it as well, and also just Encore jumping while you're charging for even extra damage on top to do just way more than everybody else when it just didn't seem too fair when nobody else has an ability like this. And they also mentioned that other things in the future may get impacted if they leave this in. So what they did is actually reduce the charge potency coming from this, but they improved, like buffed the charge time, basically shortening how long it takes to get the first charge state. So now, basically, the overcharge is still only 3 seconds, and it's still getting extra charge potency, but now it's going to be less, so it's not as broken there. And now the first stage isn't just completely removed, and you can now still use it if you want to quickly still use Spiral Edge instead of waiting for the full 3 seconds. They don't say what the exact numbers will be once they change it on the 10th, but I imagine that it's going to be a big difference. So the potency is going to be way less than it is right now. It's not going to be that 35%. I'd say it'd be more than half, like, cut off. Like, at best, like 20%, but I imagine it's probably only going to go to like 15% or something like that. Because, like, the damage was just way too high when these were compounded together. And then for the charge time, I think that would also be halved, probably like 50%. So there's still a window for the first stage to actually be used. But moving on to the next nerf here, and it's actually for the add-on skill from Bouncer, Encore Jump. So at first this may seem a bit silly because this is just a little jump that does a tiny amount of damage in comparison to your regular attacks. But for those that have been speedrunning or min-maxing what they can do within an encounter, they've actually been using Encore Jump while they're charging abilities, which gives them extra DPS in a window that typically you're not doing any damage at all and waiting for a charge attack to happen, such as Spiral Edge or other abilities that can do the same thing. So what they're changing with Encore Jump here is the specifications of it that after you damage an enemy with the first jump, jumping on the enemy for a certain period of time afterwards will not cause damage. So it will not completely eliminate jumping while doing a charged ability, but you're no longer spamming it to get more DPS. You can only do it, I would think, probably once, maybe twice, depending on how long the charge takes and how long this takes to wear off. So it's going to significantly reduce how much you're getting out of this. Basically, from what I understand, Encore Jump is now going back to probably SEGA's original intention, which is to use it to climb up tall enemies, like the Daedal Sword, for instance. So if you fell like midway while you're up in the air, or you're on the ground right next to it, you can use Encore Jump to climb up that enemy to get to its weak points, like on the chest or on the back, something like that. And now certain charged abilities are probably going to be shifted down after this update happens in terms of how great they are. They're still probably going to be used, but not just used in pretty much every case as it was with Spiral Edge. Let's move on to the next article, though, which has the rest of these balance adjustments coming on April 10th. Not everything is getting changes, but there is quite a bit here to talk about. For the first one, Hunter has sword adjustments, ironically. This one being for Caliber Streak. This one isn't much of a buff or anything, it's more of a ease of use thing, where they ease the timing for accepting early input for the first and second steps. Basically, when you're pressing the buttons to do the ability, they'll take your input earlier to then cue it to do the next step within that PA. It isn't making it go fast or anything, it's just taking your input sooner. For techniques, we have one being changed, the Dark Technique Magid, and for its change, it's worded a bit weird. They say they're relaxing the maximum number of dark orbs that can be stocked per attack when not charging. These dark orbs, I believe, come from the class skill Magid Sphere, which you can find in various classes. When you hit an enemy with an uncharged Dark Technique, you can stock up to 3 dark orbs. Typically, every time that you're doing an uncharged Dark Technique, it gives you 1 of these orbs. Then when you use a charged Dark Technique, it'll consume those orbs and increase the power of that said charged technique. So what I think Magid is doing now here is that instead of just giving you 1 of those dark orbs at a time, it may be giving 2 or 3 after you're doing this attack, which would be huge for Dark Weakness enemy rotation. So right now, for a single target, you'll be doing Gimmigid over and over again to get to the 3 dark orbs, and then doing a charged Gimmigid to finish that off and repeat that process. But if Magid is now getting 2 or 3, you can now insert that into the rotation instead of just spamming Gimmigid. But another way that you could take this change that's not as good is that currently, according to this Valen Force Guide, you can actually get multiple stacks of the Dark Orb with Magid already if you somehow get 2 or more targets that are very close together. You can instead get 2 Dark Spheres instead of just 1 per cast. But that is, a huge if, because it doesn't have too huge of a range. But I guess now, maybe if you hit 3 enemies with this change, you can get 3 of those orbs instead. But that wouldn't be like too great, because that would be super niche of a change. Next, there is braver adjustments for the bow, the dimensional ray, photon art, and the adjustments here are just an overall big buff for it, where it shortens the hit interval for the uncharged attacks. That means when you actually release the ability for that field, the time that it takes for the next set of arrows to come down in that field is actually faster, so an overall faster ability. So bigger DPS there, and you don't have to worry about the enemy moving as quickly because the ability is just faster. I don't know how much the hit interval is shortened by, but it's an increase there. And then also, they shorten the interval before launching a follow-up attack when charged. So when you charge this, you get a stock of arrows, and then any abilities or attacks that you use afterwards will do a follow-up attack from the sky, which is like a big arrow that comes out from the dimensional ray. And these currently can actually miss the enemy. They're not like hit scan or tracking towards the enemy. So because these are now launching out faster from the shortened interval, there's less likely of a chance for them to miss. Then we have Waker with the Harmonizer ability, Fredrin Riding. So this is more of another ease of use change, but they changed the specifications so players can freely change direction while holding down the PA button after a variant attack, even if locked onto the enemy. So this is the variant where you're riding the Fredrin around. And currently, as it stands, when you're not locked on, you can just freely move around. But if you lock on, you just go directly towards the enemy and you can't move at all. So with this change, it's going to be the same as if you weren't locked on, even if you are. For the rest of the changes, they are for the tech arts customizations that we currently have. The first one being the spiral edge swords. The first part we already mentioned with the Type 2 changes. But then also Type 3 is being changed, where they're increasing the potency of when you're not invoking Hunter Arts Adventure. As currently stands with Type 3, you get more damage when you do proc Hunter Arts Adventure, and you get minus potency when you're not proccing it with Spiral Edge. But now I imagine they're trying to make that less of a penalty there, so it's going to be not as much of a negative, or there's not going to be any negative at all once you get this to level 10. So it's going to be free damage when you're activating Hunter Arts Adventure or Spiral Edge. So depending on the adjustments for the Type 2 and Type 3 of this, people might be moving over from here to Type 3, because this may no longer have a drawback, but just free potency for Hunter Arts Adventure of this ability, while Type 2 is getting a reduction for its potency, where it might be so much to where it's like equal to or close enough to whatever Type 3 is giving. Also for Hunter, we have changes for Wired Lance and Partisan. With Turbulent Train, there's going to be an increased potency for the Type 3 when Hunter Adventure Arts is not invoked. The exact same as the Spiral Edge thing, where I imagine it's going to be like no longer a drawback at level 10, or not as much of a drawback. So that could actually be very good for Wired Lance, because this is like the bread and butter of what you're going to be doing with Wired Lance anyways, because this is the ability that you spam most often. So if Type 3 no longer has a drawback, this might be a good one to choose, because it's no longer affecting your main PA that you're spamming. And then with Partisan, there's going to be a change to the Type 2 version, where it's going to be a decrease in PP cost for it. Right now, it already gets to no extra PP cost at level 10, so if they actually adjust it at that level, maybe it'll actually cost less than the original ability. But this could also just be for earlier levels. So maybe it doesn't start at like 15% at level 1, and now it goes from 10% all the way down to 0% still. We'll have to see when that happens in game. Then we have a couple of fighter changes. First with Twin Dagger's Helsius coat. The Type 1 is going to have an expanded attack range. Yeah, this is the one that just does that. And already it has a pretty significant expanded attack range. And I don't know if this would actually help this out too much. Maybe if it was expanded out horizontally, it could be actually incredibly good for PSE burst farming. But I don't think it really needs more in terms of it going farther out from the character. But then also for Helsius Coat, there is a change to the Type 3, where it further increases the potency of Acceleration Drive. It already gets up to 30% at level 10, so it'll be increased even further than that. So I think if you're going to be using Acceleration Drive a lot, this is a for sure pick, because, I mean, with it being increased even more than 30%, that's going to be a huge damage increase. And Acceleration Drive, for those who don't know, is the Gap Closer class skill for Twin Daggers, where there's a small window to use the weapon action right after a PA to gap close towards an enemy. So maybe now with this being increased even further, you'd want to use Helsius Coat first, and then Acceleration Drive to do huge amounts of damage. I don't know if it would be so big, though, to where you'd want to just spam that ability over your PAs, but it will definitely be significant. And then for Knuckles, we have the 1,000 Blows change for Type 2, where it increases the potency against non-downed enemies. So right now, as it stands, the Type 2 has increased potency against downed enemies and has a penalty of minus 10% to non-downed enemies, and then also PP cost plus 5%. So with this change to increase the non-downed enemy potency for this ability, might eliminate this as a drawback or have it not be as bad of a drawback, kind of like the Adventure Arts thing from the Hunter tech customization. So this could actually make it usable again outside of downs with this Type 2, because the only drawback after this change may be just this PP cost. And honestly, if that does happen, I think that would be the go-to type to go for, because the other two don't increase the damage whatsoever, just the attack range and giving you immunity to knock back while using the PA. And that's about it. So this would actually be incredibly good. For the next change, it's for Talus Convergent Shot, which decreases the PP cost for Type 1. So this Type 1, it already gets to minus 10% technique PP cost there. So it already takes less to begin with. So they're going to decrease that even further to where it costs even less PP. I don't know if that's going to be a huge change overall for Talus, but I guess it's a positive for this Type 1. It's something, because I just already think with Talus, they have great PP economy anyways. So I don't think this is going to be a huge change for this, and isn't going to really mess with what you're choosing already. For the next thing, we have an adjustment to Dimensional Ray once again for the bow, but with the Tech Art Customization Type 2 variant, where it increases the potency. Right now, it actually has a negative 28% potency per hit when uncharged, no matter the level. But the reason why that is there is because this ability will get an increased duration when uncharged. So the field that you place out has a longer period of time that's doing hits. So overall, more hits, and that means overall more damage or DPS. But maybe it was just tuned too much with the negative here, to where there isn't enough of a damage difference that they would like to see come out of this Tech Art customization. And what's nice also with this potency increase to the uncharged variant here is that it pairs nicely with the adjustment that we saw from earlier for Dimensional Ray Uncharged, which is the shortened hit interval, which I think would also apply to the increased attack duration when uncharged. So that means the extra hits that you're actually getting out of this Type 2 is also going to have a shortened hit interval. So overall, this Type 2 is going to have a massive increase and may even see a lot more use after these adjustments. Getting close to the end, we have Bouncer Soaring Blade adjustments with Rampaging Harrier. This adjustment is kind of the same as the Knuckles 1000 Blows one for Type 2, where it increases the potency against non-downed enemies. So it's the exact same, where it gets to that plus 10% against downed enemies, and that negative 10% against non-downed enemies. So maybe they'll eliminate this here or reduce it by quite a bit, so it isn't as much of a drawback. So the exact same kind of deal there. And then for the final change with Harmonizer Wolfen Raid, the Type 3 Tech Art, you get increased marker accumulation for the second hit of non-variant attacks for Treble Clef marking. The Treble Clef marking being the mark that you can apply to enemies that gives you a little bit more potency, quite a bit more down factor. And you can ignite that Treble Clef mark for more damage and further buffs. But what the Tech Art 3 does of Wolfen Raids is it actually allows you to accumulate that mark on enemies. Or typically, you can't really do so. Like, it does accumulate, but it takes forever. But with this, currently, it allows you to do it in 3 attacks, or 3 non-variant attacks of Wolfen Raid. So with the balance adjustments, this could go from the 3 full attacks to like 2 full attacks, or even 1, but I think that would be a little bit too crazy. But it can also change up how you do rotations when you mix in other Photon Arts, because there's other abilities that give you Treble Clef mark accumulation. So this could reduce how much you're doing within those said rotations to get the mark faster, to then ignite it, and so on and so forth. And that was all of the adjustments for today. This last one here is just talking about Encore Jump once again in the same manner. Yeah, let me know what you guys think of all these changes. I think the Spiral Edge Type 2 change is huge because it was just too broken for too long, for months on end, since Tech Arts have been out. And Hunters were just on the top of the leaderboard just because this ability was so broken. Some people were even subclassing Hunter just for this ability because it was doing more damage than their normal class stuff would. So I'm glad that's changed, and it's changed in a way, I think, where it isn't going to be just completely eliminated from use. It's still going to have use overall, because the overcharge is still going to get extra damage still, just not nearly as much. Now with the Encore Jump thing, I think this was more just an annoyance with the gameplay, where you were forced to use it during charged abilities, and if you weren't, you're just going to be lower in terms of speed runs or doing things. So I'm glad that they removed the ability to just repeatedly do damage with this thing, because otherwise I think the game would have been balanced around that in the future. And then for everything else, it was mainly minor things. but it brought out a lot of tech art customizations that were kind of pushed to the side that people were just ignoring. I think now you can actually consider those things after these changes as long as they are good enough. And then for the adjustments directly to the PAs up top, I don't think they're going to be like game changing or anything. I think the biggest one is for Bow the Dimensional Ray. I could give it quite a bit more DPS there, as I mentioned, and it's kind of in the right direction of where Bow needs to be. It just, Bow needs that kind of change overall, I think. But yeah, once again, like I said, let me know what you guys think of all these and what should even be added in future adjustments. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.